You're listening to Depth Perception, supported by our patrons on Patreon. Hello, darling listeners. Got a content warning here. We're going to be talking about the unsolved probable murder of a woman. We're not going to go into graphic detail, but we are going to be talking about her remains and how she might have gotten to where she was found. This applies for the whole episode. Here's our show.
Hi, I'm Randy.
And I'm Leo.
And welcome to Depth Perception. This week and next week, we are going to be swapping between us a mystery each. And the one I brought today begins April 18th, 1943 in Hagley, UK. We're not going to begin at the beginning of the story because there isn't really a beginning of the story. There's only where the story gets interesting. So on the morning of April 18th, 4 young boys were trespassing in Hagley Wood, where they happened upon a wych elm, which is a tree, W-Y-C-H, thinking they might have found a nest, because they were looking for eggs. Obviously, in 1943, the wartime situation in Britain, pretty bad. People are fleeing to the countryside. Food is scarce and being rationed. So these guys are poaching, well, kids, not guys, are poaching in woods that belong to, I suppose, a pretty relatively wealthy man. Didn't write his name down. But in this tree, they hope to find a nest to steal some eggs from. And what they find instead is a human skull, complete with teeth and hair. And hair never makes sense to me when it's attached to a skull, because hair doesn't grow out of the skull. So I never quite understand it being attached to that. That's how it was. So obviously these are little kids. I don't know their ages, but they're definitely not teenagers, and certainly not adults. So, the thing that they do is kind of the thing you'd expect a kid might do, which is put the skull back and promise amongst themselves that they are not going to tell anybody that they found it there, because they might get in trouble for trespassing or poaching. Fortunately for the mystery, the youngest of the boys, Thomas Willits, told his parents. And after he did that, the police began an investigation, and in and around the tree, they found a near-complete skeleton, a shoe, a gold wedding ring, clothes, or scraps of clothes, and a hand. So after collecting all this evidence, they, given the skull, they have a pretty good dental, a dental record to go off of, which is a common way for people to be identified. They have some pretty good stuff going on. The forensic investigation revealed that she had been dead at least 18 months, putting the time of death on, during or before October 1941. And the evidence suggests that she was suffocated, because in the mouth of the skull was found a small piece of taffeta, which is like a ruffly cloth, I think. And also, the evidence and common sense tell you that she must have been put in this tree when?
I know it's because I cheated.
Oh.
She was put in this tree before rigor mortis set in, because
exactly.
she was in a position...
So before or shortly after she died, she was in this tree.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any idea how long it takes for rigor mortis to set in?
I think several hours. I'm not sure.
Seem a little bit more morbid than I am.
Between 2 to 6 hours. That's a guess. I've read it before. I don't remember. However long it takes your blood to turn into cheese or whatever. I don't know.
To separate into curds and whey.
That's right.
Yeah, so she had to have been put in the tree either before or just after her death, which means the body was still warm because obviously if rigor mortis had set in, you're not going to cram somebody into a tree. I know from personal experience. No, I don't.
Who doesn't?
So just like with why the boys might be out looking for breakfast in the woods, the wartime situation in Britain led to a lot of people having been reported as missing. It would have been near impossible to make a positive ID, especially considering, it's the 1940s. What kind of technology do they really have with regards to forensics and like a DNA database and everything?
They couldn't even find the Lindbergh baby.
Yeah, and that was a hell of a baby.
That's true. That was
one hell of a
that was
baby.
a big baby, and they still couldn't find it. I've heard.
A very serious baby. So it's a cold case, right? They have these dental records. They can't find a positive ID based on the dental records, which is pretty weird, given I suppose England kept pretty good dental records at the time. Generally, whether it was a matter of policy or politeness, I don't know. But she had a pretty unique set of teeth, I guess. They didn't have all of her teeth. They had most of her teeth, but even so, they were able to decide that it was pretty unique, and they should have been able to find something based off of this, but they didn't. And so it's a cold case, and this is true going through into 1944, where a graffito appears on a wall in Birmingham, bearing the following words: "Who put Bella down the wych elm? Hagley Wood." And since this graffito appeared in 1944, other messages appeared in the same handwriting, and ever since, even up until recently, the similar graffiti has appeared with different words, obviously not in the same handwriting. That person hasn't been doing the same graffiti for 70 years.
Well, he's not in the same handwriting.
Yeah, unless they've switched their handwriting. I suppose that could happen when you get old and shaky. So that is pretty much where the mystery ends. There is a woman's body found, a woman's remains found in a tree in the woods in England during the Second World War. She is seemingly, you'd think, they found a wedding ring. You'd think that they could figure something out from that.
Yeah.
Right? There has to be like a maker's mark in the ring, or, where it was sold. You'd think, I've never taken a good look at a wedding ring, but you'd think there would have to be some kind of something on it. Don't people maybe engrave their initials or, their partner's initials or something into these rings?
You'd think you'd think there'd at least be something. I don't know if there was like widely available cheap rings that didn't have maker's marks in them, but you'd expect between all of these different factors that at least one of them would have some kind of positively identifiable.
But that's the thing is, it's
trail.
Probably especially if you made like cheap rings that anybody could get, you'd identify yourself to advertise. People would want to know where that ring came from. But despite that, they have these dental records, which are very unique, based on what I read. They have a wedding ring. They just can't figure out who this woman is. You hear these kind of things. At least for me, like, I tend to try and draw a conclusion. I try to speculate and solve the crime. Maybe I've read some Sherlock Holmes novels, and I watched a lot of Law and Order when I was little, and so I try to extrapolate based on what I know about the case. And you try to fill in the blanks of the information you don't have, which, what I'm getting from this is probably that somebody was just murdered and hid and and the perpetrator got away with it. right? It's like a sequel to Fargo or something. You know, it's just like a small town murder case that leaves everybody stumped. Like the police aren't equipped to deal with it. The situation that they find themselves precludes them from being able to really, you know, dedicate the resources and time and effort to solving the crime. And so somebody that did something really bad gets away with it. But then you have the theories that, like, these are the theories that made the Wikipedia page. I can't even guess at what kind of silly stuff has made it elsewhere. But we're just gonna tackle these one at a time. Talk about them. I want to talk about you know, what each of us thinks about a given theory. You know, whether it adds up with the little bit of information we have. Because that's one of the interesting things about this is that there isn't much to go off of with it. So, theory the first is that a prostitute reported that a friend of hers, uh, a fellow prostitute named either Bella or Lou Bella, who worked Hagley Road, had gone missing 3 years earlier. So this, I believe, was reported in 1944, which, unfortunately, I couldn't find a date for either this or the date that the graffito appeared. So it's this kind of you have this question: did the graffito appear giving the person, you know, maybe taking editorial license, or maybe it's somebody like with intimate knowledge of the crime, you know, leaving Riddler clues. You know, they give the woman's real name. You know, they have specific knowledge of the crime. Maybe that's what happens. And then this person says, "Oh, I knew a Bella or Lou Bella. She went missing at the time of this crime." Or she saw the graffiti and made up a story. Right? Those are the kind of things I'm thinking. The fact that these things happened the same year, you know, you'd expect that, and I think it's even a fact that, you know, this that the finding of the body had crept into at least like local common knowledge going into 1944.
So you're asking the question of, like, did the graffiti inspire the person to come up with the story and the name Bella?
Yeah, or
Or
did somebody with intimate knowledge of the crime put the graffiti there, and then a person who knew somebody that went missing that lined up with the crime connect the dots, and this is the true story. What do you think?
I think that the first is just much more likely, personally, because
So the graffiti appeared, somebody made up a story.
yeah, or somebody thought they remembered a story, but I mean, you know, what I mean really though is that they made it up, whether they meant to or not. I think that's more likely because how weird, like, because it just seems to me like there's a larger burden of proof on whoever wants to argue that somebody who knew about the crime would put that cryptic graffiti up somewhere, and then somebody else after that happens comes out and confirms it. I mean, it's not impossible.
Well, that's the thing is, I don't know. I don't know if that's...
Well, if you
like,
can...
I don't have a timeline.
Right, if we
the
had a
unfortunate
timeline,
thing.
if you could grant that somebody who knew about the crime did put that graffito up somewhere, that's like, then it doesn't really matter that the person came out with the name Bella afterwards. But I think that what you really are saying is, what you end up doing is sort of believing that graffito is by somebody who knew about the crime just because there's another story that uses the same name. So to me, that seems a little silly. It seems a little silly because it seems like you're trying to make the graffito into evidence because you have another thing that you want to also be evidence, not because it like naturally seems like evidence. Because if all we had was somebody writing who put Bella in the witch elm, we'd have no reason to really think that was the name of the person. On the other hand, why choose the name Bella? Why choose a name at all? I don't know. I guess it makes more sense that would have come about after, based on the fact that a name was chosen at all. Like it would have come about after the story was
Sure.
out.
So I'm gonna do some improv because I was just stricken with a thought.
Okay.
So I'm gonna see if I can do this for any of the other theories. Now that I have this thought, but I'm gonna definitely do it with this one. So I'm gonna take a piece of evidence, and I'm going to try to use it to conclude that the theory is true, and use the same piece of evidence to conclude that the theory is false.
All right.
Okay.
Show me this trick
Does
that
this sound
you've got.
fun?
It sounds fun.
Okay. Wedding ring.
Wedding ring.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I don't want to say that a sex worker cannot be married, but I do want to ask, could this sex worker have been married? Is that something that can happen in, the 40s? Like, culturally, is there any chance that somebody who is a sex worker is going around with their wedding ring on, conducting sex work? To me, no. Not a shot. Like, the fact that the wedding ring was found at all is enough to throw this theory out.
Yeah, were there sex workers who would have been married at that time and openly doing sex work? I think yes, but would they be wearing their wedding ring? Probably no.
You're right. Yeah, wearing the wedding ring, they wouldn't be. They would leave it at home.
Yeah,
I'm
with you. Yeah.
Like they wouldn't even have it. They wouldn't have it in their pockets either. Because I don't know if the ring was found with the hand, but you wouldn't have it in your pocket. You're right. It does. Like it doesn't even matter about married. It doesn't even matter about married. Like the question is, would you have the wedding ring on your person?
Yep. And also, I mean, and if they were not working at the time and they had the wedding ring on, then why would we know that detail at all? It seems to me that detail about them being a sex worker is sort of based on stories in which they were killed either on purpose or accidentally, like while working.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So now I'm going to try to say that the theory is correct with the wedding ring.
Okay. All right. Show it to me.
Okay. Imagine this woman and her husband are walking along, the streets of Hagley. They're on their way to the Littleton Arms. And somebody recognizes her that, as far as the husband is concerned, shouldn't recognize her. He coerces the answer out of her and exacts revenge on her. Leaves the wedding ring there. Whether it's on purpose or it's a mistake. I don't think that makes sense. Right? It's like too easy of an answer and it doesn't make much sense. So
yeah.
So
it's shaped more like a story than just like a. It just feels too much like a myth to be like something that I would find
exactly. It's like a
story.
cautionary tale from a time before, like they were saying nice things in cautionary tales.
Yeah,
it was like women,
which is not too long ago.
Yeah, yeah. Theory number 2. In 1953, Una Mossop reported that her ex-husband, Jack Mossop, along with a Dutchman going by the name of Van Ralt, had done the deed. They met at the Littleton Arms pub for a drink. Found a woman who had she was in her cups. She was not completely coherent. They put her in their car. They took her to the woods. They put her in this witch elm. And the explanation that Una gives for this is that they were hoping that she would see sense. You know, she'd turn her life around. She'd quit drinking at the bar, which is where you go to drink and be drunk. And what they went to the bar to do. And the husband that she says did this, the ex-husband, in 1942, he was institutionalized. He was put into a mental hospital because of a recurring dream of a woman staring at him from inside a tree. And he died in 1942 at the institution.
Wow, can I tell you what I think?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Dumb. Here's why. Why the fuck?
Well, let me tell you real quick. From what I've read, that is true, and that is the stated reason that he was put in the mental hospital. That he was like driven mad by this recurring dream.
Really? What's the source on that?
Wikipedia. It's the source of everything. The Wikipedia article.
He was confined to a mental hospital because he had recurring dreams. Yeah, there's a source cited there.
Yeah, didn't look
a
into
BBC
that.
documentary. It looks like BBC Radio is
Yeah.
indicating that actually happened. So they also end with this, and it's the same source. BBC
Great.
also casts doubt on it by saying that this is probably not the correct explanation because Una Masop took 10 years to come forward.
Exactly. That's what. Yeah. So, like I said, in 1953, she came forward with this.
Let me go back to what I was saying. Why this is dumb.
Yeah, I think we're gonna be on the same page.
It's dumb because why would you have you should never underestimate the misogyny of men, but like, why would you take her in your car and then at that point you're just punishing her for passing out. You're not really punishing her for being drunk or getting in your car. Or maybe you are. Again, we shouldn't underestimate the misogyny of some men. Maybe they were just bored because she fell asleep, so they thought, well, the only thing we can get out of her now is to punish her. That's pretty dark.
Is that if this theory is true, they were trying to teach her a lesson about themselves, about something that only they had thought to do.
Yeah,
like that's the problem with a theory like this when you get into these, and I don't even have the only thing that makes this sound credible is if it's a true fact that Jack Mossop was institutionalized because he was driven mad by the recurring dream of a woman staring at him from the inside of a tree. That's the only thing that could lend credence. And that, how can that be confirmed?
I had a dream last night about people in trees. I was in the woods. I was standing under a tree. Standing impossibly high above me in the branches of a dead tree was a person standing above me. And my friends were around the tree, and they were looking up, and they said, there's somebody up there. So I walked to where they were standing. I moved out from under the tree and looked where they were pointing. It turned out I was underneath like a man who was very high up on a dead branch. He had short hair and he was precariously balanced, and he was on a branch that it looked impossible to have been able to climb. He said something something weird and kind of guarded, kind of sassy almost. When we asked him how he had gotten there, like the knowledge that it had taken him to get there was somehow kind of secret, and also that maybe in asking we were somehow a threat to him. And then the dream turned into I was part of whatever kind of community that man was a part of. I was in this community in this like kind of autumn forest, which had some kind of tree religion. We worshipped the trees. and the sun coming through the trees at twilight. We were very strange to outsiders. I think we had a banquet hall. We were good climbers and felt the presence of the trees as that of old friends. That's what I wrote down. It was weird. It was like I was in some kind of small religious community in a forest, and I had an awareness of the forest that was very different from any actual awareness of the forest that I've ever had.
Theory number 3.
Let's do it.
This comes from the MI5 profile of Josef Jacobs, the last man put to death in the Tower of London.
All right.
He was a German intelligence agent who, when he was parachuting into Cambridgeshire, he broke his ankle, and he was picked up, by the police or whoever collects spies. On his person was found a photo of his lover, singer and actress Clara Bowerl. It's a name that I couldn't even guess at how to pronounce. Baurle.
Maybe it's Bauerle because she was German.
Yeah, no superficial letters in that language. Bauerle.
No. Except for T's sometimes.
Those tricky Germans.
I mean, don't quote me on that. There's probably other stupid things that occasionally happen.
I'm going to make that the very first words of the podcast.
Okay. Or the very last.
You'll be quoted for all time. So the thing about this is that no evidence suggests that it was her, and in fact, totally contradicts that it was her. It could not possibly have been her. Literally, truly, it is impossible that it was her. That was, the idea is that maybe they jumped in, they parachuted in together. She died, and he put her in the tree to cover his tracks.
This is funny.
What?
This is funny that this is an actual theory, because I was about to suggest that it was actually the body of Amelia Earhart, and this is about as ridiculous as that in terms of how could somebody end up in the tree after coming out of the sky.
Well, if she falls and dies, and he needs to cover his tracks because he is one of 2 German spies parachuting into Cambridgeshire.
Oh, I thought she fell into the tree.
No. Well, Who can say? I can, because I actually have the facts with regards to this particular theory.
Okay, tell me what the facts are.
So, as I said, it is literally impossible, could not have been her, because she was a foot taller than the skeleton in the tree. And she is confirmed to have died in Berlin in December of 1942.
Oh, wow. Well,
so even if we didn't know for sure that she died in a hospital in Berlin, we can tell that she died after this person will have had to have died.
What if they replaced her just like they did with Paul McCartney?
Oh, that's pretty good.
You ever heard You ever heard the German version of Get Back?
No.
See where I'm going with this?
I didn't know they were still doing German versions that late into their career.
Yeah.
Or was Get Back a song that they wrote in the 50s? And
Get back to where you once belonged?
Do
you get what I'm saying? It's all connected.
The walrus was Paul.
Yeah, and the Bella was Amelia Earhart, maybe. Or it was Clara, I guess. I think it was Amelia Earhart. I think that it sounds like what you're saying. What you're saying about the whole thing, Clara died in Berlin, she was a foot taller. All of these things definitely support the hypothesis that it was indeed Amelia Earhart's body in that tree. So she disappeared on July 2nd, 1937, and this body was found when? 1941? How long? Okay. Okay, so she was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. So accounting for wind drift, the rotation of the Earth, her trajectory at the time, she was pretty high up. How long do you think it's possible that she was just falling for 4 years and then she landed in this tree?
Well, maybe if she was going fast enough, what was she? She was trying to like circumnavigate the
Like
globe,
if she
right?
was
Is that what
going
she was
fast enough,
doing?
she exactly she could have circled the Earth several times before landing. I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure how all of
Um.
that works. The
Well, I think
Coriolis
it's just
effect.
momentum.
Yeah.
Eventually, the
Okay.
plane starts going so fast, the fuselage is ripped apart, the body falls out and flies. Simple.
I'm gonna run some numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna crunch the numbers and we're gonna get back to you on Amelia Earhart. She could, as a matter of fact, still be flying today because, as we know, the faster you go, the slower the world moves around you. So she would actually only be a couple of years older, if my math is sound, which I think it
That's a
is.
very good point. That's a very good
Yeah.
point. She would be slightly younger than everybody else, which would leave her more time to get to the tree.
As we know, people in the space station age backwards.
That's right.
Yeah.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't true a couple of years ago, but it is a fact now. And I think we'll all find that that makes more sense than the last couple of theories that I have. I'm actually gonna save the fourth one for fifth and do the fifth one for fourth.
Okay. I think I see why if I'm looking at the same theories.
Yeah, I wrote them down in order, so you see why.
Cool.
It's a shame that you're looking at them. I would have suggested that you don't look at the Wikipedia page until after the show, maybe.
I'll just pretend to be surprised.
Well, pretending is a lot like lying.
Well, that's what the people in a lot of these theories must have been doing because
Oh, I don't think there's
they're
any doubt.
ridiculous. Not that I've looked at them.
Yeah, not how you wouldn't even be able to speculate about such a thing as that. So, theory number 4 is that a Dutch woman named Clarabella Dronkers, which sounds about as made up as a name gets. It's like
All Dutch names sound like that.
that's like the human name version of Castlevania. So, this series had a Dutch woman named Clarabella Dronkers was killed by a German spy ring operating in England. The tag I wrote at the end of this says no info supports this. As in, totally fabricated. It's just something that somebody pitched and it made it to a Wikipedia page.
Love it.
So I don't even have a reason to try and use the evidence to both prove and disprove this theory. There's no reason for it because there's nothing to corroborate this information. I think the only thing is drawn between the name Clarabella and who put Bella in the Witch Elm. So the last theory is the only good one. And by good, I mean entertaining. I don't mean sound. In 1945, friend of the podcast, Margaret Alice Murray, proposed witchcraft as an explanation. She suggested that this woman was killed to complete a ritual called the Hand of Glory after being killed by a group of travelers. Irish travelers are like a group connected to the Romani. called, at different times, like tinkers. The Hand of Glory, I did a little bit of reading about, is like body parts of saints are supposed to still be able to like exert benediction and perform miracles. This
Yes.
is like the black magic version of that, where the Hand of Glory is the severed hand of a killer or somebody who was killed as punishment for having committed a grievous crime.
Okay.
And the one of the powers, the only one that I read about attributed to the Hand of Glory, is like the ability to petrify people. So this one's pretty cool because it brings witchcraft into the occasion, into the conversation. I wonder if they found both hands. If they didn't find both hands, it becomes a lot more interesting. Not necessarily any more plausible.
True.
But I have to assume, based on the information that I have, that one hand was still attached to the skeleton, or elseways was still in the tree, and the other was found nearby. So, did they forget? Did the travelers that killed this woman and conducted this ritual, did they just forget the whole point of what they were doing and leave the hand behind? Did they return the hand? Is that like part of it? I don't know. It doesn't. As much as I like black magic and rituals and witchcraft and everything, like you can't use it to explain everything. And like I said, if the other hand was not found, it becomes a lot more interesting. It's supposed to be the left hand that is taken for the Hand of Glory, because that's like the bad guy hand. Again, I think this is just a theory that is bunk, and I think none of these touch on the actual scary element of this story, and I wouldn't have brought this to the table this month if I didn't think there was something scary about it. So what do you think about that theory?
I think it's the coolest. It's the coolest theory, but it also just sounds like it's founded on definitely racist suspicions about Roma people in Britain at the time that definitely still exist. Like just they're outsiders, so they probably did a ritual. Like it's just easy to like. I think that's probably would be pretty flimsy if either of us knew anything about the Roma in Britain. That's like my skeptical, boring opinion of it. As cool as it sounds, that element of it is more discrediting, I think, than the witchcraft element. To be honest,
If I'm like putting a bet on it, I would say that Margaret Alice Murray was probably told that there was a dead body and a hand was separated from that body, and she was known as like a folklorist and like
yeah,
at least at least in the context of the time was probably considered an expert on the occult, things like this. So she was probably like, I can't guess at whether she was interviewed by the police or any other investigative body, or if it's just like an offhand comment she made to somebody that spread it afterwards. But I just think it fails to touch on the real horror of Bella in the Witch Elm, which is that things happen that are really awful to people, and we will never, And sometimes we just never know why. There's never an answer. Like, all you can do is guess and speculate and try to make sense out of something that you just can't correlate all the information in a way that, gives you an answer that you can be satisfied with, be at peace with. The idea that it can happen to anybody for any unknown reason at any time, I think is like the actual frightfulness to be found here. It has nothing to do with, a group of outsiders performing magic. Like, that's not what's scary. It's not. I mean, it is fairly scary if a sex worker gets murdered for probably no reason. Chances are that if that theory is true, it didn't happen for any good reason.
Right.
It's like I said, that to me is the scare, that things happen. We sometimes we'll say, we as in all people in the whole world, we'll say, some of us will say that things happen for a reason, and some of us will say that things happen for no reason. But the thing that puts a scare in me about this is that there was a reason for this. What, a good reason, bad reason, made up reason, whatever it is. Something really awful happened to somebody. They were killed and stuffed into a tree, or they were stuffed into a tree and left to suffocate in there with a piece of taffeta stuffed into their mouth. And we are never going to know why. And it's one of a billion stories that are like that. And it's just, there's all the reason in the world for it. There is a reason that this happened, and we're never going to know. We're never going to have an explanation. And we're going to be left to speculate. We talked a couple weeks ago about cryptids, and how the more logic that gets applied to them, the less scary they become. We talked about witchcraft. The more logic that you apply to it, the less scary it becomes, because you can reason things out. And in the case of cryptids, the more logic you give it, the more thought you give it, the more reason you try to apply to the thing, you understand that it just can't be. Right? Mm-hmm. The opposite is true for witchcraft and magic. The more you think about it, honestly and earnestly, the more you think about it, the more logic you try to assign to it, the more you realize, it just makes sense that this exists in the world that we live in. And then you get to something like this, and there's a reason for it. It didn't happen for no reason. Even if somebody just wanted to hurt somebody, that's a reason. That's reason enough. That answers the question. It solves the mystery, and I don't have to be quite so wigged out by it because I can explain it somehow. But this just you're never going to know, and it makes you think or it makes me think that if maybe this is maybe it was something that was done to her in response for some perceived slight by somebody. I bet you I do that every day. I bet you I slight somebody every day in a way that at least a couple of times has left somebody seething. And it just, I don't know, to me it just makes me think how many times have I avoided a fate like this? How many times has anybody that I know avoided a fate like this? Reasoned, random shit like this. I don't know about you. Doesn't seem like we got a very long episode out of this one. if you don't have anything to say.
Nah, some lemons just don't have that much juice in them, you know.
Wow.
I think no, that wasn't meant to be an insult. It just
You've slighted me, and now I have to stuff you into a tree. Thank you for listening to Depth Perception. You can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, kicking us a little bit of scratch on Patreon.